All right, very good evening, dear participants. Welcome to lecture number 42 of the NetSet Mentoring Lecture Series. Dear friends, we began this series on 9th December with Dr. Naval Kishore Sharma from KSKV Kutch University being our first speaker. And yesterday was 9th of March and today is 10th of March. After
Wow.
4 months rather, we have Sir again with us on the 42nd session, which is on structuralism. It is indeed a pleasure to have Sir once again. Um, we know that structuralism is considered to be the beginning of literary theory proper, and our lectures now onwards are going to be more on literary theory. Like on Friday, we have a lecture on post structuralism and deconstruction, and then we have lectures on feminism, Marxism, etc. So now let us try to clear our base of literary theory by very first focusing on this topic of structuralism. I take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Naval Kishore Sharma to this session. Sir, now the session is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Parth Bhai. And I am very grateful to the Department of English and Comparative Literary Studies, Saurashtra University, Rajkot. And I am very thankful to Parth Bhai because he helped me a lot in the beginning. Last time also, he was a great help in showing you the slides. And this time too, had he not helped and had others not helped from the other end, maybe it would not have been so smooth. Okay, and so thank you very much. So I have I think close to 14 slides, and last time round I was short of time, so this time I will try to avoid that. Uh, so I will try to finish everything uh, within the stipulated time. Try to do that. Uh, Before I begin this talk, uh, I want to say one thing that I believe that everybody sitting there and listening to this talk knows everything about structuralism. But when I was a student and when I referred to books on literary theory, basic books on literary theory, I was I never got my answers because most of the books will talk about the terminology. They will give you the vocabulary, which is central to understanding the concept of structuralism. But they will bypass something very, very important, and that is what is the implication of those ideas in literary studies. So that was something which nagged me the most when I was a student. When I tried to acquaint myself with literary theory, particularly structuralism, post-structuralism, and other isms. So in this talk, I have tried to relate those dry abstract ideas with the idea as to how they can be implemented and what is the relevance of these ideas in the domain of literature, literary criticism, and literary theory. So with this little preface, I start. You can see the first slide where there is a structure uh, made of maybe Tinker toys or Lego toys. Uh, so in the first slide, you can see there is a skeleton and there is also a building under construction. Structuralism is a study of systems. By that, what I mean is structuralism examines the underlying core ideas of a framework or a network. But the structure always remains invisible, it always remains hidden. Nevertheless, everything is controlled and determined by the underlying structure. So if you look at the history of Western thought, Western knowledge system, there are two approaches towards meaning, how meaning is generated, or how we understand and decode the reality around us. There are two approaches. One is that meaning resides in the domain of, in the world of forms. So, meaning exists somewhere up there. And another uh, approach is that meaning emanates from the consciousness of an individual. So, the first uh, approach is exemplified in the philosophy of Plato, because he believes that there are this phenomenal world can be divided, classified into two parts: world of form and world of ideas. And the world of ideas is the transcendental world, and all meaning emanates from there. And the second viewpoint, second approach is exemplified in you know uh, in the Cartesian cogito. I think, therefore I am. So the thinking, conscious, rational individual, he is the one who decodes the reality around him. So this is another view. Okay. Structuralism rejects both these views. For a structuralist, meaning does not reside in the world of forms, in any transcendental world, nor does it reside in human mind, but meaning exists in structures. And therefore, this theoretical approach or this theoretical position is called structuralism, because structures give meaning. I always prefer a Drishtanta methodology whenever I speak about anything. So I will give you examples also. So this is the fundamental point, that it is a study of systems, and two, it rejects both these ideas that meaning resides in the world of ideas, and meaning emanates from individual consciousness. And third very important point which I would like to make in the very beginning is that meaning cannot be found in the phenomenal world. Meaning exists in the interrelationship between components or constituents, or units. It may be words, it may be any sign. Okay. So nothing can be, in other words, nothing can be understood, nothing can be decoded in isolation. We need to look at everything in its totality. For example, this is an example which you might have read, come across in many books, in lectures. That, take for instance the traffic system. The red light means stop, green means go, and yellow means pause. Pause for the light to turn red, or pause for the light to turn green. Now, the red light means whatever it means because of its interrelationship with green. Otherwise, red light will not mean the same thing which it does if there are no green light and no amber light to give it meaning. Therefore, meaning is always relational. It is generated by difference between units, between components, between constituent parts of anything, of a structure. One very interesting thing is, you can see the picture of human skeleton. Human skeleton is also a structure. It remains invisible. Take, for instance, grammar in the context of language. Grammar remains invisible. So, structures always remain. Take, for instance, God, who runs this world. Okay. He also remains invisible. But structure is the is the is the uh, is the most important thing in a system. Say, for instance, if you look at the the skeleton, there are 206 bones in human body. We can lift our neck up, we can move our neck right and left, but we cannot rotate our neck in 360 degrees, just as Linda Blair's neck twists in 360 degrees in the horror film called Exorcist. Those of you who have seen that film will be able to recall. Because it cannot, our neck cannot rotate in 360 degrees because our structure does not allow that to happen. Similarly, in English, we have, say, a sentence like, which is based on SVO pattern. John writes a letter. Ram sings a song. These are classic SVO sentences. This sentence is possible in English, but it is not possible in Hindi or in Gujarati or in Urdu. Why? Because the underlying structure is different in all these cases. So structure decides what is possible in a certain context, what is not possible in a certain context. Take another example. We have, if you are familiar with Indian classical music, we have 10 thoughts. And each thought has a raga. Okay. And these thoughts are called parent scales. Okay. These thoughts are also the structure. So imagine Bhairavi is a thought. Okay. Bhairavi is the structure. And Bhairavi is a rag also. So you have innumerable film songs. So many film songs based on this rag Bhairavi. Rag Bhairavi remains invisible. What you hear is the songs, which are based on the arrangement of notes which are peculiar to Rag Bhairavi. Rag Kafi will have a different arrangement. Rag Malkos will have different arrangement. Rag Asavari will have different arrangement. So this is also ragas in our Indian music system are like grammar, are like human skeleton. Okay, so this is extremely important when we are talking about structuralism as a system. Say, for instance, I'm sitting in this room. This room has a door, it has two windows, and it has walls, and it has a roof. A roof does not mean anything in isolation. A window or a wall does not mean anything in isolation. But all these constituent parts, just as noun or verb or adjective or adverb, separately do not mean anything, but when they are joined in a sentence, they give meaning. Okay, so what makes this room a room is the simultaneous existence of a door, a window, a wall, a roof. So that is why I am quoting a couplet out of context, but you too must have heard this. It goes like this: चमन में इख्तिलाते रंग व बू से बात बनती है. What makes a garden is when there is fragrance and when there is color together. Only fragrance or only, a color will not make a garden. And of course, the second line is very important. Hum hi hum hai, to kya hum hai, tum hi tum ho, to kya tum ho. Of course, I'm aware of the fact that I'm quoting it in a different context, but just to make the idea, just to illustrate my point. So now we go to the next topic. This theory, call it a theory, call it an intellectual movement, call it a critical approach, call it a theoretical position. Okay, this structuralist uh, structuralist criticism derives its insights and its ideas from the work done by Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure, whose picture you can see on the screen. He was a Swiss linguist. He taught in University of Geneva, and right next to his photograph, you have the cover page of his book uh, called Course in General Linguistics. Uh, this book was published posthumously, meaning after his death. He did not publish this book during his lifetime. He died in 1913. And after his death, because he was a very popular teacher, so after his death, some of his students and friends collected together, assembled his notes, and put it together in a book form and published it. Unfortunately, last time I spoke on modernism, unfortunately, you know, this book was translated into English in 1959. Imagine. This book came out in French in 1919, and this was translated in English in 1959 by a gentleman called Wade Baskin, whose name appears on the cover page. And later it was translated again by another gentleman called Roy Harris in 1983. And so Ferdinand de Saussure uh, was a was, this book is based on his lecture notes, and what he taught general linguistics. General linguistics means this book does not deal with uh, any particular language, but language as a system. Okay, and during his lifetime, he did not publish any book. I think he published one book, which is on uh, vowels in Indo-European languages. Okay, use of vowels in Indo-European languages. And incidentally, it is very interesting that he wrote his PhD on the genitive case in Sanskrit. Okay. Anyways, so prior to Saussure's time, linguistics was diachronic. Okay, of course, that's a technical term, but diachronic means uh, linguists and philologists focused on, they paid attention to the growth and development of language, how vocabulary changed, how pronunciation changed, how grammar changed, how syntax changed over a period of time. Diachronic, chronic from chronos meaning time. Okay, dia meaning across time. So this was diachronic. The approach towards language was diachronic. And Ferdinand de Saussure, when he emerged on the scene, he postulated that the study of language should be linguistics should study the contemporary usage of language. That is synchronic. He focused on synchronic study of language. So this is a very big shift in the study of linguistics that happened with Ferdinand de Saussure. And later, his ideas. Later, his ideas spread to different parts of Europe, and structuralist theory has impacted, enormously influenced various disciplines and various branches of learning and various fields of inquiry. For instance, philosophy, Merleau-Ponty, hmm? Anthropology, Lévi-Strauss, semiology, Roland Barthes, linguistics, Roman Jakobson, okay, uh, uh, psychoanalysis, Jacques Lacan, literary studies, Gerald Genette and Jonathan Fuller, Marxism, Louis Althusser, narratology, of course, Vladimir Prop and Grimus and Todorov. Okay, so its impact has been varied and far-reaching. So what do they do? Structuralists claim that they can study any kind of human behavior or cultural practice, right from fashion to myths to narratives to literary texts to advertisements to social etiquette. They can study everything. Okay. Uh, then we move on to another idea, how Plato, Marx, and Freud can be called early structuralists. Although they were not familiar with this word, but if we look at their theory, okay, in my slide you can see ideal perfect cat and imperfect cat. So ideal perfect cat lives in the transcendental Platonic world of ideas, and imperfect cats are the ones whom you and I see around us. Okay, so we were talking about underlying structures. So Plato is also a structuralist because for him reality exists in the world of transcendental world of ideas. So is Marx, because as you can see in the picture, there is base. So for him, economy, means of production, relations of production, these things decide other things, what you call superstructure, media, law, culture, education, okay, politics, everything, education, everything, other things are determined by, and superstructure also, plays a role because it shapes the base. Okay, so it's a synchronic relationship. And then we have Freud. As you can see, there is a picture of an iceberg. This is actually brain. So just as the larger portion of the iceberg remains submerged under the sea, only its tip is visible. So the unconscious is the structure, because the unconscious uh, controls and guides the conscious. Okay, so Plato, Marx, Freud, although they are not saying exactly the same thing which Saussure and others are saying, but they are also structuralists in a way, in a sense. Okay, we can call them proto-structuralists. Okay, proto-structuralists. And now the lexicon, the vocabulary, or the terminology, uh, which is very important for understanding the concepts. So there is one sign, signifier, signified. You all know this. Langue and parole, synchrony and diachrony. I just spoke about it, and syntagmatic and paradigmatic. Okay, and one more. You should. I forgot to write one more term, that is binary pairs. Okay, so we should look at these ideas one by one. Sign, signifier, signified. It's a very simple idea, uh, yet not so simple. Uh, Saussure, in his book Course in General Linguistics, says that a sign has two components, signifier and signified, and they are like, two sides of a sheet of paper. Sign, signifier, and signified. But signified, don't confuse signified with referent. Okay, I will tell you what. Signifier is the acoustic image, or the sound of the word. When you say tree, okay, the sound of the word, acoustic image. Or when you write, okay, so the graphic image, when you write TREE, signifier. Okay, so this is signifier, either the acoustic image when you speak, or uh, the graphic image when you write the word tree on a piece of paper. When you say tree, it evokes a concept in your mind, that is signifier. Most students confuse signified with what Saussure calls referent. Referent is extra linguistic. It is actually the tree, okay, that exists in the phenomenal world. But signified is linguistic. It is actually a concept, just a mental concept that flashes through your mind when somebody says tree. Okay. Now, the relationship between signifier and signified is arbitrary, because if we decide that we will call this object, instead of calling it tree, we will call it free, then there would be, it would be known as free. Okay, so what I mean to say is that this arbitrariness is 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 actually based on usage, convention, and shared agreement, okay, among the speakers of a linguistic community. Because we all have decided, okay, that we should call this object a tree, therefore it is called a tree. But there is nothing tree-like in the word tree that we call, a plant a tree. Now, had there been something tree-like in this word, there would not have been different words in different languages to designate this concept. So we call ped in Hindi, we call gach in Bangla, we call jhad in Gujarati, we call vriksh in Sanskrit, we call darakht in Urdu, we call arbor in French, and we call baum in German. That means there is nothing inherently tree-like in the word. So words do not mean what they mean because an individual gives the meaning, but words mean what they mean because they differ from each other. Take, for instance, just take two letters, what Saussure calls phonemes. There are 31 phonemes in English. Okay, phoneme is the smallest meaningful unit of sound. So take, and it can be a consonant, it can be a vowel sound, it can be a consonant sound. So take, for instance, C and T, and put U in between. The sound will be different. Cut. Put A, it would be cat. Okay, or it would be cute, or it would be, so like this. So, or for instance, B and T, bit, bat, but, bout, bait. Okay, so all these words are different because of the difference in the phoneme. So what Saussure says is that a word means whatever it means, not because we give it meaning, but because of the difference that exists between words. And this difference exists because of the difference in phoneme. You understand? So this is therefore he makes a very important statement. He says, in language there are no positive terms, only differences. So red means red because it is not green and yellow. Cat means cat because it is not rat, pat, hat. Okay, and so forth. But when I was, as I told you in the beginning, when I started reading about structuralism long back, I found this fact in books. But I thought, what is the implication of this? How do I relate this idea with literary studies, or in what way it is relevant for me as a student? This is, this sounds very simplistic when you tell this to anybody. Maybe he will turn around or she will turn around and say that this is very simplistic and this is very commonsensical. But the idea is that it is very radical and very revolutionary because, number one, because it means that language, we do not create our reality, but language creates our reality. Language produces our reality. Therefore, the same person, Peter Berry in his beginning theory gives the same example, the same person whom somebody calls a freedom fighter can be, a terrorist for somebody else. Okay, that means reality is the same. Say, for instance, somebody who lives in your neighborhood is a teacher. Okay, when he goes to his place of work, and when he's coming back, he's a commuter. When he's standing in the queue in front of a booth, he's a voter. Okay, and he is a father. He's a husband. He's a buyer when he goes to buy grocery for his house. Okay, so the same person, the reality is the same, but what we call him, is it all depends on how we define him. That means how language defines. So we don't define anybody. How language, decides or determines reality for us. So because it gives primacy to language, because it gives primacy to text, language, therefore it is often said that structuralism is anti-humanist, and that this criticism is not actually without basis. And that is why when we learn a new language, you see, we acquire a new outlook, a new vision, or you can say we acquire a new pair of eyes. Okay, because the concepts which exists in Hindi may not exist in English. I was just thinking about this the other day, that Jutha is a concept, okay, which you will not find this the equivalent of the nearest equivalent of Jutha in English, because this concept does not exist in Western thought. Okay, so the idea is that to acquire a new language means to acquire a new vision. Okay, therefore different languages view reality differently. Okay. Okay, now we move on to the next slide. This one is very interesting because this is called Treachery of Images, and this is a painting by René Magritte, and this of course problematizes the link between what has been represented and the reality. And this is a sign. I forgot to tell you that there is an American theorist called Charles Sanders Peirce. Okay, and he has classified sign as icon, index, and symbol. Okay, so this would be an icon. Okay, icon is a sign wherein there is a clear-cut resemblance between what is depicted and the real object. So he calls he calls this painting Treachery of Images, and in the caption says that this is not a pipe. So how do you interpret this? This is not a pipe because this is not PIPE, those letters, but a painting on canvas. So this is one way of interpreting it. This is not a pipe because this is not a pipe. There are two pipes, one in the mind and one in the painting. So this is not a pipe. Another interpretation is that we know that this is not a pipe, yet we are compelled to call it a pipe. Okay, so this is not a pipe. And this is not a pipe because, yes, this is not a pipe. This is a painting by a very famous painter called Treachery of Images. Okay, so this is how he, problematizes this very idea of signifier and signified. Of course, uh, uh, purses category would fit in a better way here. So this was about sign, signifier, signified. And the second concept is long and parole. Long is Saussure's term for language. Language with its conventions, with its rules, with its codes, the grammar of language. Language in its totality means long. Uh, Grammar, vocabulary, syntax, all the rules, okay, which constitute language. The totality of language is long. Okay, and what is parole? Parole is in French, parole means speech. The individual, how an individual uses language. Because when I am speaking, I am not using all the rules, which exist in English language. Okay, so this is how I, as an individual, make use of the resources of language which are available to me. So this is parole. Okay, so long and parole. Now I will tell you what is the implication of this for us, for literary criticism and students of literature. So long and parole. Long is abstract, of course, because it deals with rules, and parole is concrete because it is concretized when a person starts speaking a language, and it is an underlying system. And parole is, of course, performance. It is social, and parole is individual. Language, long again, is legislative dimension because it deals with rules and codes, so and conventions, so grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation. And this one is the executive dimension. Parole is the executive dimension, how a person uses a language in a real life situation. And this is long is potential. How many different kinds of sentences are possible? So the potential. And parole is all about actual utterances, and long is all about rules, and parole is behavior. And long is homogeneous naturally, and parole is heterogeneous because different people speak the same language differently. And Saussure equates long with the the set of rules which we follow while playing a game of chess. Okay, so the game of chess, all the rules which are used in a game of chess are can be called the long of chess. And parole is, of course, how a particular player plays a game of chess. So what is the implication of this for literary studies is that a structuralist will focus on the long of a literary text. That means the grammar of literature, as Jonathan Fuller says. The grammar meaning the form, the structure. Okay, so for a structuralist, what is more important is the structure of a sonnet. That sonnet is a 14-line poem, mostly about the theme of love. Whether it is Petrarchan sonnet, whether it is Shakespearean sonnet, whether it is Miltonic sonnet, or whether it is sonnet by Derozio, or holy sonnets by John Donne, or sonnets used in Vikram Seth's The Golden Gate. Okay, for a structuralist, what is more important is not the parole, not the individual, variety, not the different examples of real life examples of sonnet, but the abstract, rules which govern this form. Okay, so Derozio writes a sonnet about India, motherland, and John Donne writes holy sonnets, and somebody else uses sonnets for some other theme. So for a structuralist, paying attention to these individual examples is not important. What is important is the long. Okay, so he will always look at the big picture instead of, say, for instance, if we take an example from drama, he will be looking at, say, revenge tragedy. What are the codes and conventions which are followed in a revenge tragedy? He will not focus on Keats' Spanish tragedy, or Hamlet, or for that matter, Titus Andronicus, or Duchess of Malfi by Webster, only on the long. Okay, only on one particular, the what you call parent scale in thought. Okay, the grammar, the skeleton. Okay, so that is why for a structuralist study, long is more important than parole. Okay, and then the third idea. This is called syntagmatic and paradigmatic uh, 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 bars or axis. Okay, syntagmatic and paradigmatic uh, bars. Uh, they constitute the bipolar, structure of language. You can see there is a cross, and one is horizontal bar. This is called axis of combination, and the other one is called axis of selection. From the axis of selection bar, we choose words and we combine those words along this bar, the horizontal bar. So to give you an example, we what we do is, because he is theorizing about the general rules which are applicable to any language. So say for instance, I am learning a new language. So what do? I pick up some words and then I try to string them together in a sentence. Okay, so the words which I pick up are picked up from the axis of selection, and this bar is known as paradigmatic bar. Okay, and the one along which we combine those words are called is called the bar of combination, or syntagmatic bar. You will be able to recall Coleridge's famous definition of poetry. Poetry is best words in best order. So best words are actually picked up from this bar of selection, and then they are combined along the syntagmatic bar. So best words would be the choice of words, and best order would be the syntax. Okay, now words which are used along the syntagmatic bar, the horizontal bar, are linked with each other grammatically, sequentially, and linearly. Okay, and the words which we use from the paradigmatic bar are connected with each other associatively. Okay, so we do these two things in language, and say for instance, I will give you an example. I give you an example of SVO sentence in the beginning. Say, Ram eats a mango can be rewritten as Sita sings a song, can be rewritten as Rohan writes a letter. Okay, so these words sing. Although we are, say for instance, in a sentence like Ram eats a mango, there are certain words which have not been used but are capable of being used. So therefore, the relationship, syntagmatic relationship, is always relationship in presentia, because you can see the words in a sentence. You can see all the words. Ram eats a mango. So this syntagmatic relationship is always a relationship in presentia, and paradigmatic relationship is always a relationship in absentia, because Sita sings a song can replace this. Okay, so Ram can be replaced by Sita. Sita can be replaced by sings, can be replaced by eats can be replaced by writes can be replaced by kicks. Okay, so all the words, so they're in a sentence, in an SVO sentence. If you look at an SVO sentence, other potential, words which can be used in place of a noun or in place of a verb are there, yet they are not there. Okay, they are there, yet they are not there. So this is a relation. Paradigmatic relation is always a relation that exists in absentia. Uh, Now, something which is very interesting is a uh, that we do this because structuralists always claim that they can theorize on the basis of these couple of rules related to linguistics and language. They think that they can, theorize on everything. So I will just give you an example that 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 when we go to a restaurant, and when we eat, okay, there, we also select and combine. Say, for instance, there are a variety of soups available. Okay, so there would be tomato soup, mushroom soup, corn soup, hot and sour soup, broccoli soup. We pick up one. There would be then roti, tawa roti, tandoori roti, paratha, naan, missi roti, and so on. We pick up one. Okay, and there would be, say, if you go for paneer, then there would be kadai paneer, tikka masala, then paneer shahi paneer, paneer burji, paneer palak, matar paneer, and so on and so forth. So we pick up one. Okay, and then desserts. So we pick up gulab jamun or ice cream or halwa. So what I'm saying is that there are so many options. Okay, just as Ram sings a song, Sita writes a letter, Rohan kicks a ball. In the same way, we connect. Okay, we connect. We pick up one tomato soup, and then we have tawa roti. Then we have tawa roti with paneer bhurji, and then we have, say, desserts option, gulab jamun, ice cream, halwa. We pick up halwa like that. Okay, so we select and combine. When we wear a dress, we do the same thing, much the same thing we do. Now, something very interesting is that if a fiction writer, when he writes, when you are writing a short story or when you are writing a novel, what you do is you tend to think syntagmatically, meaning because you make a string of episodes. Okay, so when you are narrating, when you are weaving a narrative, one episode follows another, and that episode follows yet another, just as it happens in a sentence. Okay, so that is why prose is always associated with this syntagmatic axis. This is very interesting. And poetry is always associated with paradigmatic axis. Why? Because paradigmatic axis is one of substitution, one wherein words are connected associatively. So Ram can be replaced by Sita, and Sita and sings can be replaced by eats, okay, or some other word, right? So, for instance, I'm writing a poem on, say, old age, okay. So I pick up similar ideas from the paradigmatic axis. Old age, I pick up a metaphor of, say, setting sun, okay, or dusk, or evening, or autumn, or dry leaves, or half burnt candle. All these are connected to the idea of old age. Okay, therefore, poetry always is inclined towards the paradigmatic dimension of language, just as prose is always inclined towards, tilted towards the syntagmatic axis of language. And not only that, when when you say, the two friends are talking, so when one friend is very fond of talking and he is telling you what he did on, say, Sunday. So he says, I woke up late and then I made a cup of tea for myself. Then I went to have a haircut, and then I came back. Then I prepared food for myself. So what he's doing, he's actually connecting, so syntagmatic operation. Okay. And when somebody says, oh, yesterday I heard a song, and that song reminded me of a poem which I had read in my childhood. And that poem was later set into music by so and so, a maestro. Okay. So what he's doing is he is relying on paradigmatic access. I think I am making sense. I do not know, because this is the problem of online lecture. Anyways, so the next point is this one. Now I have discussed all the key ideas associated with structuralism. Now I want to talk about three big players. So one by one, I will first of all take up Lévi-Strauss, and then Roland Barthes, and then Lacan, and I will then discuss their key ideas, particularly those essays which are mostly prescribed in university syllabus. Okay.
So you have 10 minutes with you.
So what do I do? I can stop right now.
No, sir. Please carry on. We have 10 more minutes.
Okay. So no, if you find it interesting, otherwise I told you I started with the premise that all the students know everything, but I'm trying to
No, please continue, sir. We would like to know
Okay.
about.
Okay. 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 Thank you so much, Partbhai. So this is, you can see, you know, there are 52 cards in a deck of cards, and there are four suits. Okay, four suits: clubs, diamonds, hearts, and spades. What we call in Hindi, chidi, eat, lal pan, and kala pan. Okay, fine. Now you see, if you read these cards, okay, from left to right, just as we write, okay, if you read this first column, okay, from left to right, what do you get to see? You get to see 13 cards, 10 number cards, and 3 picture cards. Okay, that's it. If you are looking at a particular row in isolation, and if you are a vertical reading, then what do you see? You see that there are you see that the same pattern is replicated 4 times, and there are 4 suits. So your two different readings give you two different, conclusions. Okay. So what I want to what I want to tell you by showing you this slide is that one way of reading a narrative, okay, say for instance, story, say a detective story or a revenge tragedy, okay, you read it from the beginning to the end, and you do not bother to see the same pattern which gets replicated in the second story, third story, fourth story, and fifth story, and so on, so forth. Okay, so when you read it vertically, the result is very different. Then it gives you a comparative, insight. Okay, now so what happens is, say for instance, you are looking at the story of, you are reading the story of Ramayana. You read the story of Ramayana, Valmiki Ramayana, okay, uh, from the birth of Ram to the slaying of Ravan, and your reading is over. But if you compare, the episodes of, say, Ramayana and Mahabharata like this, in the manner in which I have shown it on the screen, then what do you see? You find, when you do the vertical reading, you find that both the stories are about good versus evil. You find that in both the stories, Vishnu takes an avatar to destroy evil. When you look at the two stories, you find that both the stories are about two brothers. I mean, two sets of brothers. In both the stories, Draupadi is born of fire and Sita is born of earth. In both the stories, Swayamvar takes place. Ram breaks Shiva's bow, and Arjun, hits the eye of the fish. Okay, Duryodhan tries to disgrace Draupadi. Ravan abducts Sita. Okay, again, Ram goes to exile. Pandavas are also sent on exile. In both the stories, the role of guru is very important. So we have Vishwamitra on the one hand and Drona on the other. Okay, so how does this happen? This happens because of this mode of reading. Okay, so this is the mode of reading which Claude Lévi-Strauss, okay, an anthropologist, he has read the Oedipus myth in the same manner. Now, those of you who do not know the Oedipus myth, I will tell you. Parth, can I have 5 minutes? Then maybe I will stop.
Yes, sir. Sure.
So because it would be of no. I mean, it would be pointless to stop without.
No. In fact, you have maybe 7-8 minutes still.
Okay.
Yes.
So I presume that all the students may not be familiar with the Oedipus myth. So I will tell you the story in brief. Okay, only the operative part. Okay, so Sophocles' Oedipus Rex is different. Okay, he is looking at just as phoneme is the deciding factor in separating a word from one word from another. Okay, in the same way, in Claude Lévi-Strauss's anthropological reading, my theme is the most important concept. My theme is analogous to phoneme. Okay, that is the smallest meaningful unit in a mythical narrative. Okay, so what happens in there are so many different versions of Oedipus myth, and he is reading all the different versions, and he's trying to analyze them and trying to trying to establish, impose a bit of order in chaotic versions. Now, very briefly, what happens is that the great grandfather of Oedipus was Cadmus. Okay, and Cadmus's sister Europa was abducted by the by the by the Greek god, supreme god called Zeus. Okay, and naturally he was the brother, so he was very angry. So he went out to look for her. Okay, for her missing sister, for his missing sister. Sorry, for his missing sister. And then he goes to the temple of Delphi, the oracle of Delphi. Whenever the Greeks had any problem, they will approach the oracle. And he was informed in the oracle, the temple, he was informed that you should stop your search. It is pointless. And on the instead of pursuing your search, you follow a cow. Okay, a cow, and where this cow you are chasing stops, you should found a city there. Okay, so he acts accordingly. Okay, so he follows a cow, and the cow stops at a place. Okay, so he wants to sacrifice. He wants to sacrifice that cow so that he can found a city there. But for sacrificial ritual, he requires water, and there is a water spring nearby. But then that water spring is being guarded by a dragon. So what he does is he kills the dragon. Okay, and after killing the dragon, he is instructed by goddess Athena. Okay, in Greek stories, gods and goddesses keep interfering in human affairs. Okay, so goddess Athena tells him that you bury the teeth of this dragon into under the earth. So he does the same thing, and once he does that, so many armed men spring from earth, and when he gets frightened by them, he throws a stone, and those men who have appeared from nowhere, from beneath the earth, they think that one of them has thrown the stone, so they start killing each other, and finally five of them survive, and these survivors help Cadmus in founding the city of Thebes. Okay, so this is one story. And of course, with Oedipus story, you are familiar. Oedipus was the son of Laius, and Laius was given an oracle even before the birth of Oedipus that the child will kill the father and sleep with the mother, and therefore, in order to avert the prophecy, they abandoned the child, and etc. etc. And he later, ended up marrying his own mother, and he had 4 children out of this union, out of this incestuous union, and 2 sons and 2 daughters. So who are the sons? One is Polynices and another is Eteocles, and 2 daughters, Antigone and Ismene, 2 daughters. Okay, and Laius was the son of Labdacus. Okay, so these are the dramatis personae, and after the death of Oedipus, 2 of his sons, Polynices and Eteocles, they killed each other because they both of them were coveting the throne of Thebes. Okay, so this is the skeleton of the story, which will help you understand this what Levi-Strauss is doing in this chart. Okay, so he has an uncanny style of arranging and he's very selective. That is the criticism which is often given against Levi-Strauss's method of reading a myth, that he's very selective. But nevertheless, so you see there are 4 columns here. In the first column, we have Cadmus seeks his sister Europa, ravished by Zeus. Okay, so you know this. Oedipus marries his mother Jocasta, and below that, Antigone buries her brother Polynices despite prohibition, because Creon, who was the king, who was the uncle of Antigone, he said that Polynices should not be given a decent burial. Okay, his body would be eaten up by vultures because he was a traitor. Okay, whereas his brother, okay, Eteocles would be given a royal funeral. Anyways, so Antigone, violates that royal this thing order and goes ahead and buries her brother. Okay, the second one is the Spartoi kill one another. Spartoi are those armed men who sprang from the teeth of the dragon. Oedipus kills his father Laius, that you are very familiar with. Eteocles kills his brother Polynices. I have already told you. Cadmus kills the dragon. This I have already told you. Oedipus kills the Sphinx. Oh, okay. Sphinx was a monster. She was ravaging. She had taken the city of Thebes to ransom, and she would ask some questions to everybody. And when they will come up with a wrong answer, she will kill them. So Oedipus was the one who answered her question correctly, and this is how she committed suicide, and he was held as the new king of the kingdom of Thebes. Okay, so Sphinx is a monster with a woman's head and loins body, winged monster with a woman's head and loins body. Okay, and in the fourth row, you have Labdacus, Laius's father, lame. Laius, Oedipus's father, left-sided. Oedipus, swollen foot. Now I will explain. Okay, what he says is that if you look at this myth, you find, two binaries. The first binary you find in the first two rows. Cadmus seeks his sister Europa, ravished by Zeus. Oedipus marries his mother Jocasta. Antigone buries her brother Polynices, despite prohibition. This he calls overrating of blood relations, meaning blood relations have been taken to an extreme. Okay, exaggerated importance has been given to blood relation. For instance, Oedipus marries his own mother, or Antigone buries her brother despite prohibition, or Cadmus seeks his sister Europa. This is Levi-Strauss describes as over estimation. Okay, overrating, not overestimation, overrating of blood relations. And the second one is the opposite of that, underrating of blood relations. Okay, so Oedipus kills his own father. Eteocles kills his brother Polynices. Spartoi kill one another. So this is underrating. Here what happens is blood relations are underrated, violated. Okay, so this is one binary. And second set of binary is in the in the two rows. Cadmus kills the dragon and Oedipus kills the Sphinx. These two rows are about, the question whether human beings have emerged from earth or whether human beings are born out of sexual union between man and woman. So Levi-Strauss says that the entire Oedipus myth is not so much about why Oedipus, killed his father, married his mother, or why did he blind himself. Nothing. He says that this myth is all about whether human beings were self-born, that means whether they were born from earth, autochthonous, or whether they were born of a union between a man and woman. So in this third row, you see Cadmus kills the dragon. So by killing the dragon, he establishes, he destroys a monster who is earthborn. Okay. When Oedipus kills the Sphinx, he destroys a monster who is earthborn. That means human beings are not earthborn. Okay. Otherwise, they will not treat a dragon or a Sphinx as their enemy. On the contrary, the fourth row says Labdacus, Laius' father. The meaning of his name is lame. Okay. There is a letter in Greek alphabet, lambda. Okay. If you see its shape, it looks like as if a lame man is walking. Okay. So Labdacus, the meaning is lame. That means the Greeks believed that if somebody has sprang from earth, if somebody has taken birth from Earth, then he will not be, because all animals are closer to the Earth. Okay, they can't walk upright. They cannot walk vertically as we do. Okay, they are all the four-legged animals. So this myth says that Lapticus is lame because he is earthborn. He finds it difficult to walk, and then walk like a human being. Okay, so and Laius is means left-sided. That means he too has a problem, walking on earth. Okay, as a human being. That means human beings are not earthborn. Sorry, are earthborn. Sorry, are earthborn. And Oedipus, the meaning of this name Oedipus is swollen foot. Okay, because his ankles were tied. Okay, when he was a child, so that he's left to die on the top of a mountain. So he too cannot. He also walks with a limp. He's also lame. So all these three categories show the fact that human beings are earthborn. The third row shows that human beings are not earthborn. Okay, so for Levi-Strauss, this myth, because Levi-Strauss has worked, he has applied structuralist ideas to several other things. Okay, to totemism, to kinship rituals, etc. I'm not talking about that, because Oedipus myth, this concerns us as students of literature. But then the criticism which is often given against him is that he is very selective, and these are his own subjective inferences, not because he bypasses something very important. Why Yocasta hangs herself? There is no mention of Yocasta hanging herself in this chart at all. So anyways, Parth, thank you very much. I had more slides and more things to talk about. I had Jacobson, I had Parth, and I had Lacan. But then what to do? Constant of time.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. This is, you went from explanation of concepts to certain very, very important theoretical propositions. There was this card thing, reading it both the ways. That was really new for me as well. I'm sure it must be the same for participants also. All right, can we have questions from the participants? We have around 5 minutes remaining with us. I mean, we've crossed 7, but then we can have 5 minutes of interaction. Participants, you can put your questions in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask.
I can't see anything, Parth.
Sir, you can
it would
stop
be better
sharing.
if you can.
Sir, you can stop sharing the slides so that you'll return on the screen.
So I press stop sharing, right?
Yes,
This
sir.
box. Okay, stop sharing. Okay. Then where do I go? I go to the page. Okay.
Yes.
I can see myself. I don't know.
Yes.
This online mode of
True.
interaction is really.
Yeah. Do we have any queries? Okay, there's one question by Anay Bhatt, sir. I think this is very fundamental, but then I think this is important. What can be called the structure in structuralism? So the structure of structuralism.
Structure of structuralism is called structure, yeah. I can say, I could not understand the question. What is
Anay, do you mean the word structure, the term structure? What do you mean by structure of structuralism? If you can please.
I could not actually decode the question.
Yeah, if Anay is there in the meeting, if he is not left.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Anay, please.
What I meant was that what is the base of structuralism? Like, from where does it emerge? What is the structure of structuralism, like that?
What is the structure of structuralism? Actually, in the beginning, I don't know whether you listened to my talk from the beginning. I told you that there are two ways of looking at the world, okay, and making meaning out of whatever we see, okay. One is we think that one is that meaning resides in the world of ideas, and another one is that meaning comes from the consciousness of an individual. And structuralism rejects both these propositions. Now, in doing so, it gives primacy to language. Okay, it gives primacy to structure. So, if you want another word from me, it would be any underlying system. You understand? Any underlying framework, any underlying network that remains invisible, that remains hidden, yet it controls everything else. But while they are uh, bypassing and ignoring the fact that individual consciousness is pointless, world of ideas is pointless, what they are doing is they are creating unknowingly, they are creating a new center. This is a big irony of structuralism. They are creating a new center uh, by giving lot of importance and primacy to language, which later, Derrida, a problem which later Derrida,
Yes,
deconstructs.
yes.
Okay, you will have a lecture day after tomorrow on that. So I think this is what you were asking. I don't know. Have I answered your question to your satisfaction?
Annie, has your question been answered?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That was the irony. I couldn't find the word irony.
The
Yes.
irony is,
Yes.
they are doing away with everything. They actually, what happens is that everybody, all disciplines, tend to be scientific. So structuralism also tends to be scientific. Okay, but in being scientific, what it does is it gives lot of importance to. Now imagine if they give so much of importance to language. What about somebody who cannot speak? What about somebody who is deaf and dumb? How does he perceive reality? Or if, or if red means red, then what gives the meaning of redness to red? Tell me. So there are, say for example, I will tell you something very funny. I mentioned this red light at a traffic intersection. Okay, Lady Mao once said, because in China, the color red has a different implication. So when Lady Mao was going through the street one day, and she saw the red light, and she said that we should do away with these red lights, because red lights stand for red lights. Red, the color stands for progress. It should not stand for it should not mean stop. Okay, rather it stands for development, growth, progress. It should not arrest one's growth. It should not stop one's growth. It should not stop one's movement. So this very sign is is irrelevant. So
True.
that was, of course, I mean, just in an enlightened when I said this.
This is again something that Derrida would point out, sir, that
Yeah,
multiple significations.
yeah, yeah.
So, that's, yeah, Annie, we will have another talk on this on Friday.
Yeah,
Sir,
yeah,
there
yeah.
are amidst the compliments in the chat box, there is one question. Sir, can we use the concept of structuralism on Waiting for Godot? And then
Yes.
Radhaji continues. She says, how can one select the word, just like the example of restaurant menu? I think that's a supplementary question. But then, can we use the
The
concept of
supplementary.
structuralism?
The,
Yeah,
the, the supplementary I didn't understand. Okay, I will
even I,
ask you.
even I. But then, if
Ah,
she can
I
unmute
will tell
herself
you.
and ask later. Yeah.
I will tell you. Any text, because the notion of binary is very, very important in structuralism. Okay, so we make sense of this phenomenal world. Our very consciousness, our very intelligence operates on this principle of binaries. Okay, so what happens is, yes, in Waiting for Godot also there are certain binaries. Okay, so structuralist critic will look at those binaries. Okay, binaries of nothingness versus something, movement versus stasis. Okay, there is a what should I say, fondness. You see a fondness for doubling in Waiting for Godot. There are two tramps. Okay, there are two boys. There are two acts. Okay, then Lucky and Pozo. There are also two. So all these things are important from the structuralist point of view. And what was your second question?
Uh,
And you can deconstruct beautifully, because if Godot is the center, the moment you decenter the center, the tramps will stop waiting for Godot. You understand? if
True.
if they are waiting because there is a center. They will stop waiting for Godot if Godot is removed from. So like God, he does not exist in the circle, yet he is moving everything.
True.
So whenever we are looking at a text, any text, even for instance Ramayana, it is basically a story about good and evil. Okay, so we understand Ramayana through, of course, binaries.
True.
Yeah.
And maybe just like you mentioned somewhere, wait, the center, but then is the center within the structure? So is
The
Godot
center is
really there
without.
in the play?
No, he is
So
not there in the play. I
the
will tell
center,
you.
yeah.
I will tell you something very interesting. There is a play by Rabindranath Tagore called Sacrifice. Okay, Sacrifice, and Sacrifice is a play about how animals are sacrificed to goddess Kali. And
Okay.
one set of characters in that play say that goddess loves sacrifice. Okay, another set of characters say that goddess is a mother herself. So how can she, love killing and bloodshed? Okay, so
Right.
these are two ideas. And finally, what happens is in that play, the the idol of Kali is thrown out of the temple, and this crisis is resolved. Okay, so Kali is not there, and yet she is there. So long as there is there is Godot or Kali, uh, manipulating everything from outside, there would be a crisis. The moment you remove the center, decenter the center, your problem will disappear.
True. Okay, maybe the second part of the question rather is not clear to us. If you can unmute yourself and ask. Meanwhile, we have another question by Rutvisha. She says, "Sir, can the prescriptivists be
Hmm.
called have the diachronic approach, and the descriptivists called to have the synchronic approach?
Come again, please.
Uh, can people who practice prescriptive
Prescribe.
criticism, I think
Yeah,
she
yeah,
means
yeah, yeah,
prescribe,
yeah. Uh-huh.
said to have the diachronic approach, said to be following the diachronic approach,
Mm-hmm.
and people who describe said to be following synchronic approach?
To an extent, yes. To an extent, yes. To an extent, yes. But then I don't think that this has anything to do with prescriptive or descriptive mode of criticism. It is a way of reading. One is more comparative. One is done in isolation. I think it is. I think it that way. So
Okay.
one is, yeah. One gives you an isolated picture. You study a text separately without any reference to other things, and another
True.
gives you a comparative viewpoint. So the comparative viewpoint is more important, because when I said that a structuralist will focus more on Lang, that does not mean that they do not study the parole, the
Right.
individual examples, but because I will tell you something very interesting. If you want to understand the unconscious, you will have to go through consciousness, right? You will have to understand the conscious first to understand the unconscious. So you will have to understand the parole first to have access to Lang. You understand? So you will have to go through sonnet to come up with any kind of theory about a form called sonnet.
Sonnet. Yes. Um, I don't find any questions in the chat box. I think that's
Everybody
it
is
for the
bored.
day.
Everybody is bored.
Not at all. In fact, had we had enough time, sir, we could have. I mean, I was personally willing to go through those three remaining slides, and but then this time Nazi thing, it's this is
I
something
was
that I
I
hate.
was I was interested in discussing a bit of Lacan, and particularly
Right.
his one-liner, which is very difficult to understand, and
Huh.
it took me a lot of time to understand when I was reading these things. The unconscious is structured like language.
Right. Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
will tell you only this, that for understanding this, you will have to know a bit of Saussure. You will have to
Right.
know a bit of Roman Jakobson, particularly his essay on speech disorder called aphasia, and
Yes.
of course how Freud looks at dream work mechanism, condensation and displacement. So if you understand these three, because in literary theory there is a lot of overlapping and interconnection. Okay, so you
True.
cannot understand one concept unless and until you understand another. And in this
Okay,
case,
there are participants requesting if we can have a second part of this lecture where sir can continue with the,
second part of you. What you can do is you can write to me if you do not
yes,
understand this concept, unconscious structured like language. I can
true,
send you a detailed answer. And
true.
one more suggestion I can give you. One more suggestion I can give you, because I do not claim any originality for whatever I speak, because nothing is original in this world. Okay, there is a very good lecture, 30 minutes, a gentleman called Louis Marcos. Okay, it's a very good lecture on structuralism, and a couple of points which I made here. You will find there also. Not that I have copied from that much of originality, I will claim, but I was pleasantly surprised when I found that he's also saying the very same things. Which
Right.
I yeah.
So we have a
So
lot of participants requesting, but then we will definitely give it a serious thought if we can have a second
second
part of
lecture would be
the
for
lecture.
only 25 minutes, because I just want to talk about Roman Jakobson and
True.
Barthes and of course Lacan. So only
Yeah,
25 minutes if you
and
can give, I can.
and sir, you might be happy to know your old friend Professor Balaji Ranganathan is going to talk on Lacan
Okay, very
uh,
good.
sometime in April.
Uh-huh.
Maybe that's a separate
That
session
would
on
be
Lacan,
that
post
would be a
Freudian
treat.
psychoanalysis.
That would be a treat,
Yeah,
because he is
uh,
an authority on psychoanalysis, Freud and Lacan and other.
true. So fine. We will definitely try to arrange, dear participants. I am equally enthralled, and
You
we will
can
try.
take my email ID from Parth.
Yes,
uh,
yes, certainly.
and if you do and try to decode this idea, unconscious structured like language. Okay, what
Yes,
I try to do is that I do not know whether I have been able to do this or not today or last time round when I spoke, but I always try to simplify, rather oversimplify a very difficult concept. Okay, so this is because this is something which I find very challenging. Not simplification, not the act of simplification, but but these
true.
ideas, unconscious structured like language. Somebody writes and moves ahead, and then we keep scratching our heads
Yes,
as to
yes.
what he means by that.
True. No,
So
no, but I think the comments in the chat box testify the fact that you have been
thank
able
you
to
so much.
do it very well,
Thank you
sir.
so much. Thank you
Even
very
the
much.
thought example was another of its kind. So,
Thank you so
like
much.
that was
Parth, we will
so.
talk. We will talk. We will
Sure,
talk.
sure,
No problem.
definitely. But
Yeah.
then officially, I take this opportunity to thank you, sir, on behalf of Alumni Association Department of
I
English.
also thank everybody.
Thank you for sparing your time, sir, and sorry for the initial technical glitch that
No,
happened on
no, no.
our
You
part.
sorted it out so beautifully. I am rather thankful.
That's your generosity. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, dear
Thank you very much.
participants. See you on Friday.